Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. Episode 16 here, recording this Tuesday morning. It's 9:54 a.m. on the dot. By the time you're listening to this, you're probably eating lunch, eating dinner, on a walk, doing some fun stuff. So appreciate you guys tuning in, as always. What a weekend. Holy freaking cow. If you followed like my work at The Athletic or had listened to the podcast last week, you probably picked up on the fact that I didn't really think that was out of the question. Really thought it was going to be a doozy of a game, and obviously it turned out that way. But it was a blast in there. If you attended the game, you know that environment was spectacular. I said it on the podcast last week, but like I knew I was going to have trouble sleeping the night before that game, and I did. So it was a good time. Partly because you had a good time at a Saturday Minnesota Golden Gopher tailgate, and I got to be honest, was not familiar with your game. The Golden Gophers against Nevada. I mean, it can be more fun than you might expect, and the Rouser tailgate over there, they do a pretty good job. So had a very good time. But to be there Sunday for that environment between the Vikings and the 49ers, obviously, and then to watch how it played out, just wild. And it was, you saw the videos, I'm sure, post game of the whole locker room singing Many Men. You could understand the reaction when you go toe-to-toe with that physical team and perform the way they did. I'm going to do just like I did last week at this time. I'm going to do like 5 thoughts that I had after watching the game, obviously being there, being in the locker room, showing up Monday, listening to Kevin O'Connell's press conference, and then watching the All-22, talk to some people around the game. I'm just going to do 5 thoughts, and I'm just going to reel those off throughout the course of this. If you're watching on YouTube, you can hit that like and subscribe button right there. We've got a lot of you guys, and it's been fun to kind of build this over the first couple weeks of the season. I do want to do some live Q&A stuff, so we're gonna do that. I'd be open and willing to hearing on a timing on what you guys feel like would be best there. But really want to do that. I love that live interaction. I think that would be a great, just like middle of the week, later in the week, maybe even like day before the game type thing, depending on if I'm at the Rouser tailgate, having a good time or not. But want to do that. So appreciate you guys following. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, you can rate, review, like, whatever the heck you do on those podcast apps, and would be very much appreciated. But we're just going to jump right into it. And just like last week, I'm going to start with Sam Darnold because he is the quarterback, and this is a quarterback-driven league. Was very impressed with him on Sunday, obviously. There was the brutal pick in the red zone where you could argue they should have been maybe running the ball in general, but Fred Warner snagged that pass in the red zone. But other than that, the takeaway for me is he just looks so calm, comfortable, and in rhythm. And it's such a far cry from you go watch other guys around the league right now. And some of these guys are young guys, and I've watched them because I'm interested in like how some of these rookies and second-year guys look. But there are you watch the Bryce Youngs, the Caleb Williams. I mean, even honestly, you watch Kirk Cousins through the first 2 weeks, and until that final drive Monday night, his feet just looked chattery. It's like there's just no settled down, comfortable feel in the pocket. Whereas Sam Darnold, it feels like he has confidence in the offensive line to block for him. He has optimism that the receivers are going to be able to separate. The intent of the play is never a question for him. And again, just like last week, as I talked about with the plan and the scheme that Kevin O'Connell and them are putting together, like you just can't take that for granted in a league where you have pass rushers like Nick Bosa flying around the edge, where you have Malik Collins, Javon Hargrave penetrating the interior. Like it is ripe. These situations, these pockets are ripe for being for looking uncomfortable, for looking hesitant, and Sam Darnold just has not looked that way. And I will say, I tweeted this after the game, but before the game, I don't know how much you guys know about when you're a media member, what it's like. I mean, obviously you go up to the press box, you take the elevator, it's mayhem. You got adrenaline going. At least I do. Just like you guys probably do as you're filtering in and finding your seat at US Bank Stadium. And then you sit, you get some food. They've got a phenomenal spread up there at US Bank Stadium. I'm very grateful for that. I do not take that for granted. And then I just sit up there with my binoculars and I'm looking down on the field. And you're just, for me at least, I can speak for myself. It's like I'm just trying to see who's talking to who, what interactions are happening. Brandon Staley, who's an assistant head coach, talking to Kevin O'Connell and Wes Phillips. What does that look like? Is Kevin talking to Kyle Shanahan? What other interactions are going around the field? Which coaches seem to be nervous and pacing around the sidelines? Which family members are in attendance? Who's Kwesi Adofo-Mensah talking to? Is he talking to Ziggy Wilf? Is he talking to Mark Wilf? Is he going across the field to say hey to John Lynch, his former boss? All that stuff is in the crosshairs of my binoculars before the game. And I love watching those interactions, even though you obviously don't know what is being said. But I bring all of this up because before the game, right kind of before the Vikings team, they circle up. Josh Metellus is in the middle. He hypes the guys up. But before they go out there for that circle, I watched as Josh McCown, the Vikings quarterback's coach, who was a teammate of Sam Darnold's during Sam's hectic rookie year, and who knows Sam's path and just the trials and the tribulations and the lack of being surrounded by optimal coaching and talent. Josh McCown knows that better than literally anybody. And before they circle up, you saw Josh McCown walk over to Sam Darnold, kind of rub his shoulders, pat him on the chest probably 8 times. And it was very, very he said something, he whispered something in Sam Darnold's ear, and you could see Sam grin and smile. And there is something with that too, where it's just a relaxed element of comfort and confidence that just cannot be taken for granted. And it was very cool to see that moment between those two guys. As I tweeted, I can't imagine how much this means for them. I will say, in reporting the story that I did on Sam Darnold prior to the season, I talked to a former Jets executive, a longtime Jets executive, who was privy to really everything that happened in there. And he told me that when he found out and his family found out that Sam was going to be back with Josh McCown, he said that his wife was emotional about it, knowing how close those guys have been, and how much Josh meant to Sam, how much Sam believed in Josh. And really, Sam Darnold was 20 years old when he enters the NFL, and here is this guy, Josh McCown, who was the de facto quarterbacks coach, bringing him along. And so to see that moment Sunday, and then to see Sam perform the way he did again against the team that he spent time with, and that probably helped him take the weight off his shoulders, which just happens when you're a quarterback in a struggling situation, just really freaking cool. But the takeaway among all that for me, the one thought was just, I just will say it openly. I did not expect him to look this comfortable and this confident and this in rhythm. I tweeted also the back shoulder third and 9 throw to Jalen Naylor, which had 4 seconds of anticipation, which, for people who don't know, if you're listening, what is anticipation? It's a great question. It's when a quarterback throws a pass before the receiver's looking, and it's a lot of that is when you are so calm and dialed into the intent of the play, you can let it rip before the receiver's ready in anticipation of what's about to happen. It's something that Brock Purdy has been phenomenal with over his first couple of years in the NFL, and it's something that we've seen time and time again with Sam Darnold through the first 2 weeks. So Yeah, I mean, I guess the question now is like, is this sustainable? Well, I mean, look, like if if there's a back-to-back test that is going to prove that out or not, it is Houston in this upcoming weekend. I mean, this defense is so dialed. They fly around. I mean, you could just rattle off guys on their front, on the second level at linebacker, Azeez Al-Shaair. That guy has always stuck out to me as a second-level defender. The secondary with Derek Stingley and Jalen Petrie. And I mean, this group is relentless, and D'Amico has them playing really fast. Now, part of me wonders, it's a similar structure to the 49ers, so does that mean the plan doesn't have to change a ton? Those are questions that I think we'll iron out over the course of the week, but then obviously not really be able to answer until Sunday. But if I didn't start with Sam Darnold, that would not be doing the podcast right, you guys right, because when a guy looks as good as he has through 2 weeks, and it's not like this media hyped narrative thing that I think he just legitimately looks good. And so that's thought number one. The second thought, and I'll stick with the offense and then transition to defense, and to slow play the defense is not probably doing Brian Flores and that personnel just a service because of how good they look. But the second thought is the run blocking. Holy cow. I wrote about this for Tuesday at The Athletic, which you can read at theathletic.com and subscribe for a deal that probably, I don't know how they exist, but they do. The Vikings averaged 4.05 yards on the ground before contact on Sunday, which is the best number of any team in the NFL this year in a game. It's also the best number of any team of any of Kevin O'Connell's teams in a game since he's been here. And you saw it on the film. It was like, I mean, these double teams just to use a phrase that a lot of film people just like, they were just throwing guys out of the club. I mean, it was double teams between Blake Brandell and Garrett Bradbury. Garrett, who had a really good game, I will say. And then on the other side, Ed Ingram and Brian O'Neill. And then I got to give Johnny Munt and Josh Oliver credit as tight ends. It was a tour de force of a blocking performance. And it's also paired with the vision and the ability to bounce outside that you saw from Aaron Jones, obviously in week one. You saw a little bit of with Ty Chandler, but really in Ty Chandler in week two, I mean, that was why Ty Chandler's performance was why players internally have been talking about this guy for a long time. And I remember talking to an offensive lineman last year over the course of the season who's like, this guy can be really good for us. Now, you guys are probably like, then why weren't they playing? Well, there's other aspects at play. There's the pass protection. There is knowing the scheme and the verbiage of that, which is a far cry difference from what Ty Chandler had to do in college at North Carolina. And it's why this is such a instant impact league. You like, what have you done for me right now? Not what can you do for me in 2 years? Whereas like in a different sport, in baseball, you can lean on player development. You can lean on, we're going to take time for this guy. In the NFL, it just doesn't happen. But to see them stick with Ty, to see him develop over the course of 3 years, I mean, you give credit to the front office for identifying. You give credit for the staff for sticking with him. The Curtis Modkins, the Wes Phillips, the Chris Coopers, the offensive line coach, like they deserve credit for sticking with a guy who now in his third year looks like he can be really freaking dynamic. But just the I don't know if the Vikings are going to be able to duplicate the run blocking performance. And again, as I mentioned, D'Amico Ryans and Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter, like this is not going to be an easy test Sunday, and it's going to. I mean, when you are flying high, like I always think of Nick Saban, who talks about like the positive narratives and all that stuff is like rat poison. Like, will the Vikings listen to the press clippings at this point, or will they come out and hand it to a team that is as physical and as dynamic, and maybe even like defensively, they might fly around more than San Francisco does. Now, the Texans don't have Fred Warner, who in that game Sunday played one of the greatest games I've ever seen played. I mean, it was evading blocks. It was reading pass coverage. It was like gap integrity. I mean, it was as good of a performance from a linebacker as I imagine, like, I might ever see, as you guys, like, will see. I mean, like, I'm not the PFF grades I go back and forth on. It's a fine data point. It's not something to write home about. But I watched the game, and I'm like, it should have been 100. And it was like a 96 for Fred Warner. So the Texans don't have a guy like that. But again, I mentioned Azeez Al-Shaair, the Texans linebacker. They have Christian Harris. I don't know his health right now, but I really believe in that Texans defensive group. So the run blocking group, which was phenomenal Sunday and deserves praise, will be tested again, and it'll be very interesting to see how they respond. So that is point number 2. Like, I probably shouldn't say this. I saw Christian Darrisaw at Starbucks Monday afternoon, and he's like, "Is this where you work?" I'm like, "No, I usually don't, but I didn't want to stay at the facility, so I see Darrisaw, and I'm watching film as I see him, and CD's one of my guys, and so I said to him, I was like, I didn't give you guys enough credit for what you guys did initially." He's like, "Oh, and it could have been better." So the type of mindset you like hearing, the type of insight you're only going to get at the Alec Lewis show, where you get conversations with very highly paid left tackles at Starbucks. But anyway, we will transition to thought number 3. I said this at the top about the Minnesota tailgate, but I will pair that with a former Minnesota Golden Gopher, Blake Cashman. I was not familiar with your game. Holy cow. This guy, I think I've said holy cow 3 times, which is both fatigue settling in. It's the Alabama in me. It's every aspect of that. And so I'm glad you guys get to experience that with me, frankly. Like, it's you guys are probably like, would you shut up and just get to Blake Cashman? And I'll say yes. Blake Cashman, I mean, he was everywhere on the field. And you guys who are attentive saw that. I mean, I mentioned this buddy Gunner who was really big in me starting this podcast in the first place, and he was texting me during the game of like, Blake Cashman was freaking everywhere, and he was flying to the ball, he was tackling well, he was visually following Brock Purdy's eyes and deflecting passes, one of which turned into an interception. And it part of me is just like, you know, they from a defensive personnel perspective, year over year, they moved off of Daniil Hunter and signed obviously the edge and added the edge rushing group of Andrew Van Ginkel, of Jonathan Grenard, of Dallas Turner. And to me, just watching thus far, that's been a plus because it's allowed a level of versatility that they did not have last year with Daniil Hunter. But they also moved off Jordan Hicks, who obviously suffered the leg compartment syndrome last year, which was an unbelievable, brutal injury. The fact he returned from that was wild. He was a clear leader in that locker room, a voice who would always, like, after games, be chopping it up with Harrison Smith. Those guys were really tight. Jordan was just an exceptional shoulder to lean on, I think, for Kevin O'Connell in his second, and really his in his second year. And so, you know, to move off of Jordan and to bring in Blake Cashman, I mean, like, you talk to certain scouts and, like, you know, athletic guy, really he can see well, he can identify stuff, he works really hard. He came on in Houston recently with the help of D'Amico Ryans, but he's navigated a lot of injuries. And I mean, I'll tell you, talking to Blake after the game, he was like, he had just showered, and I'm seeing scars on his shoulders, on his torn labrum, shoulder injury. So, like, you can identify those injuries, but I just did not know that when he was healthy and as dialed into a system that allows him to play as visual as he is able to play. And by visual, you guys are probably, what does that mean? Well, like, just use your eyes, follow your eyes, know kind of what's coming, but also just be aggressive enough with what you're seeing underneath. And he was that on Sunday. Jonathan Grenard, who played with him in Houston, said he's believed that Blake, when he's healthy, is one of the best off-ball linebackers in the NFL. And frankly, while I am not the most elite off-ball linebacker mind, and while I can see Fred Warner being absolutely the elite of the elite, what Blake Cashman did on Sunday, and if he can duplicate that, the contract that they paid him, which is like 7.5 AAV million. I mean, that is, you're going to look back and be like, unbelievable. But that, you can say that about Andrew Van Ginkel. You can say that about, Jonathan Bullard in the run game. I mean, that's the personnel that Brian Flores has brought in. But the number 3 point is just like, put some respect. I got to put some respect on Blake Cashman. Like, I just was not familiar with what was possible there. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing what he does this weekend against his former team. It is not, again, like this Houston Texans offense, they are intentional. They use motion well. We'll see about Joe Mixon. I expect him to be healthy, but he had a little hip drop tackle situation with his ankle Monday night against the Bears. But stopping Joe Mixon's going to force conflict for Blake Cashman. They'll probably use underneath routes with Tank Dell and Nico Collins. Those guys run well after the catch, which is just part of the system that they've obviously taken from San Francisco. So, going to be an immense test. But I think Blake Cashman can pass it, and I'm not underestimating him anymore after what I saw Sunday. So that is point number 3. Point number 4 is just totally looking ahead, and it is Brian Flores. There's no chance that CJ Stroud, who is as dialed in as they come for a young quarterback, there is no chance that he has ever seen anything like he's going to see Sunday with Brian Flores' defense. On the rewatch, I was laughing because there were times where they lined up 8 guys on the line of scrimmage, and now Brian Flores is doing what he did not do last year, which is just rush 4. And why is he doing that? Like it's a very interesting question that I'm sure Brian Flores will talk about on Tuesday as the coordinators meet with the media. But the question of like, why is Brian Flores so willing now to just rush 4? It's like, well, if you can get home with 4, which they've done a fair amount, then it allows you 7 guys in coverage. And the more guys in coverage, the harder it is for a quarterback to find open zones, which they started to do at the end of last season. And so that's part of why you sign the edge rushers they have. It's part of why you're using stunts the way that they did not last year. I mean, that has stood out on tape as well. You've got Jihad Ward on 3rd down, lining up on the nose, and then taking out a left tackle as part of a stunt that allows Andrew Van Ginkel to loop all the way around and affect the quarterback. And so, I mean, there were times watching the film where Dallas Turner, the edge rusher who's long-arming Trent Williams, is now playing off the ball. What kind of package can they start to mix in with that? I'll be fascinated to see. Will they do that Sunday against CJ Stroud? I don't know, but he doesn't know either. And he has to identify, well, if Dallas turns off the ball, what does that mean they might do? And that's the Brian Flores experience. It's like you always have to be concerned of something else. What if they line up 8 and they bring all 8? I don't know. What if they line up 8 and they bring 4 with 2 edge rushers dropping, which they can now do because Andrew Van Ginkel is the best coverage edge rusher in the entire NFL. But you saw on film just going back, or you guys might not have seen, but I'll tell you, like Andrew Van Ginkel, not only can he drop off the line of scrimmage, but he can like affect the coverage off the line of scrimmage. He can play visually because he processes so well. And he also understands what's coming, which is obvious to you guys, given he almost had the 2nd pick of the season in 2 games on a screen pass. So, Brock Purdy after the game said crazy scheme to Brian Flores on the field, but it really is. And it is a puzzle that these quarterbacks have to sort through every single week. And really, like, while Jesse Minter and what they're doing in Los Angeles with the Chargers is definitely dynamic, it's interesting, it's deceptive. Mike McDonald is the same type of way in Seattle with what they do. And there are other guys around the league, Baltimore, Miami, that are mixing it up. Like there really, truly is nothing like what Brian Flores is doing. And it's funny, like, to see people start to give credit nationally. I'm like, well, if you knew what he did last year with the personnel that he had, I mean, it still will go under talked about. They were the 11th best defense by DVOA last year, which accounts for strength of schedule. And they were doing it without any of Brian Flores' personnel. Their best player was Daniil Hunter, but they could not even generate pressure often when they rushed 6 players it's unbelievable. It really is. And so to see this matchup with him against CJ Stroud, who again is an elite processor, who is as prepared as they come. It's why I'm speaking on Tuesday, but I'm ready to roll. Like I cannot wait to see that matchup. So that's point number 4 is really praise to Brian Flores. I mean, I guess that's what that is. Number 5, and it's another thinking ahead with the defense, but the cornerbacks, the Stephon Gilmores, the Shaq Griffins, Byron Murphys, this is going to be the week to me where they are tested more than they've been. Now, the 49ers are obviously talented. When you have Debo, Brandon Ayuk, I mean, those guys are no joke. And George Kittle, Juwan Jennings is a great player. And a couple times on Sunday, they did beat the Vikings in man coverage. But I will say, even on those patterns, it felt like the Vikings were draped all over those guys. Like I'm thinking about the Juwan Jennings crossing route where Byron Murphy was right there. And ultimately it was a great catch by Jennings, I believe. But, this skill group that the Texans have with Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell. I mean, it's a lot of shifty guys. It's different body types than what the 49ers have, but all of them seem to be on exceptional pages with CJ Stroud. So will they throw at Stephon Gilmore, who seems kind of like he's just like eliminated all aspects of quarterbacks wanting to throw at him thus far this year. And I don't blame them because he looks sticky in coverage when you watch him on film. And it's funny because he's like a very quiet guy in the locker room. He wears Jordans. He looks cool. He's a Hall of Famer. He's all pro. But like, he just kind of like low key goes about his thing and just dominates on the field. And you just can count on him. And the Vikings really, in my 2 years here, have not had that. Even with Patrick Peterson in 2022, he's a phenomenal player and potential Hall of Famer in his own right. Like, he was not as locked down in man coverage as Stephon Gilmore is. So that group against this Texans offense, which they will play with 11 personnel, which is 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 receivers. That is going to be a blast to watch. And I'm not going to count out Brian Flores to be able to scheme something up to bother those guys, whether it's zone, whether it's man. I mean, I will say, Cam Bynum after Sunday's game said, like, it was a pretty simple game plan. And then definitely, I remember talking to Harrison Smith after week 1, and he's like, we didn't really do a ton. Like, they really have not, for as good as they have played defensively, and it has been as good as you'll find across the NFL, it doesn't feel like Brian Flores has really thrown the kitchen sink out, which is kind of like, to me, it's almost like you have cards to play. It'd be like playing Texas Hold'em and like you haven't gone crazy yet. You haven't gone all in. I don't know if that's a good analogy, but I'm sticking with it. And that's how I feel. Will they do that against an offense this dynamic? I don't know. Probably not, because you're not going to want to give up explosive plays. But watching those Texans receivers against the Vikings cornerbacks and secondary in this game is something that as well that I really look forward to. So that's 5 thoughts. And I'm going to give one bonus because it's Tuesday. It's 2-0. You guys deserve it. How about Will Reichard? I want you guys for a second. Think about how you have felt when he is trotted out there for an extra point and for a field goal. And you guys are probably thinking, yeah, I guess it's a good point. Like, I haven't really been nervous at all. This guy, and he hasn't kicked 50-yarders, and he hasn't really been, I would say, tested yet. But thus far, when he trots out there, I've said this before, and this is no slight on Greg Joseph, but for 2 years, every time he trotted out there, for both for PATs and field goals, I felt like if someone handed me a coin and you flipped it and I called heads or tails, it was the same as like whether Greg makes it or not. I know his percentages were higher than that. No, it was like 80-something%, but it felt 50-50 at best often. And you have a guy in Will Reichard who it feels like I'm going to nail that heads, tails every single time. And so it's got to be, for you guys, comforting. Now, again, will he get tested? Will these games continue to be close and him continue to have to make field goals? Yes, but in general, it's got to be. It's been wild. I mean, he's a rookie in his first year in the NFL, and he just has not looked phased at all whatsoever. And frankly, talking to him, talking to people at Alabama who watched him change the course of kicking at that university, it's not all that surprising. So that is that. We're gonna end it there, and that was fun. It was fun to chat around with you guys. Again, let me know in terms of live stream days, times, what you guys feel would be best. But I really do want to do some of that, and hopefully they'll be better than the first time we tried that, where I stared at the camera for a minute and didn't say anything. Trying to figure out the internet connection. But yeah, let me know on that. We'll be back with a guest later this week to talk a little bit more about the intricacies of Flo's defense and kind of preview the Texans. So I'm looking forward to that. At The Athletic, I've got a very fun story Wednesday that's kind of absolutely out of nowhere that I'm looking forward to you guys, to hearing what you guys think of, and looking forward to you guys reading that. But yeah, as I said at the top, like and subscribe. Whether on YouTube, you can hit those buttons right there. Should be pretty easy. I as always, appreciate you guys' time and you guys listening. And yeah, should be a very fun another week upcoming. And appreciate you guys listening. That's the Alec Lewis Show. See you guys soon.